Most people aren't lazy, they're disoriented. That distinction matters because lazy is a comforting explanation for the outsider looking for an individual to blame. It lets us stop thinking. It locates the problem inside individuals and quietly absolves the systems they live inside. But when you actually look at modern life, laziness doesn't describe what's happening at all. People are working constantly. They're busy. They're juggling jobs, side hustles, school in some cases, family obligations, and an endless stream of administrative tasks. The problem isn't a lack of effort. It's that effort no longer points toward anything intelligible or fully coherent. And when effort loses direction, it doesn't just disappear. It drifts. One of the defining features of modern life is signal overload. The sheer number of inputs we're expected to process, emails, notifications, policies, platforms, metrics, obligations, it is staggering. Cognitive psychology has shown for decades that human working memory is limited and that excessive task switching degrades performance while increasing fatigue. More recently, the American Psychological Association has linked chronic information overload to stress, decision paralysis, and burnout. This isn't about being overwhelmed once in a while, it's structural. Many people now work multiple jobs, not the majority, but an increasing number, often in different locations under different rule sets. A day might involve one employer in the morning, a gig platform in the afternoon, coursework at night, and constant transit in between. Each role comes with its own expectations, norms, and priorities, and none of them coordinate with the others. So the mind fragments. That fragmentation becomes especially visible in the bureaucratic friction of modern work. Even jobs requiring minimal formal training often demand navigating a maze of logins, passwords, passcodes, rotating credentials, training portals, and compliance systems. Passwords expire, often 4 times a year, permissions lapse, access is revoked, work halts, not because the worker is incapable, but because the system has locked them out. Organizational research shows that this kind of administrative burden disproportionately increases exhaustion without increasing productivity. The effort is real. The output is not. You can spend hours managing credentials, chasing approvals, consulting IT, redoing training modules, and still feel like nothing meaningful was accomplished. Not because you didn't work, but because the work wasn't oriented toward anything you could recognize as valuable. This helps explain a common paradox of modern life. People feel exhausted and ineffective at the same time. Exhaustion is treated usually as evidence of laziness or maybe weakness, but in many cases, it's the opposite. It's the result of sustained cognitive and emotional effort applied to poorly aligned priorities. Psychologists describe this as a misfiring of executive function, when attention, planning, and decision-making are consumed by navigating complexity rather than producing value. Energy is burned just staying afloat. You don't stop trying, you just stop moving forward. Disorientation is also reinforced socially. Human beings are deeply attuned to group priorities. We look to those above us, managers, supervisors, senior staff members, to infer what matters. This isn't a flaw, it's how coordination works. Classic experiments in social psychology show that people routinely defer their own judgment to perceived authority, even when they feel unease about the task itself. In workplaces, this means priorities cascade downward, regardless of whether they're proportionate, meaningful, or even sensible. A minor technicality can suddenly become urgent. A procedural detail can be elevated into a moral test. And because there are thousands of rules, standards, and regulations, different people inflate different priorities, often shaming others for not sharing them. When everyone is defending their own corner of the system, alignment collapses. Zooming out, the problem is deeper than any single workplace. Modern society is marked by extreme specialization and compartmentalization. Roles are narrow, and metrics are local. Therefore, incentives become highly fragmented. What's missing is a shared hierarchy of importance. If everything is urgent, then nothing is. If all priorities are the top priority, then no priority truly matters. Philosophically, this is the failure of pure transactionalism, the idea that life can be managed as a collection of explicit rules, contracts, and measurable outputs. When value judgments are avoided, they don't just disappear. They go underground, expressing themselves as anxiety, distraction, and moral confusion. Research in moral psychology suggests that lack of value clarity is associated with increased stress and compensatory behaviors, like binging, numbing, and compulsive distraction. These are not signs of sloth, they're symptoms of misalignment. This is why calling people lazy makes the situation even worse. It misapplies moral language and replaces understanding with shame, and it leaves the underlying structure untouched. Disorientation also explains behaviors we're quick to condemn: overconsumption, accumulation, and even greed. When enough of something is unclear, wanting more feels reasonable. When purpose is missing, substitutes inevitably rush in. None of this excuses bad behavior, but explanation matters. Without it, we mistake symptoms for causes. Here's the quiet truth most people recognize but rarely articulate. When you know what you ought to be focused on, when it aligns with your conscience, resistance fades. You don't need constant discipline. You don't need motivation hacks. You're simply oriented already. And when orientation is present, many of the numbing behaviors disappear on their own. Not because you forced them out, but because they were never the point. So before we diagnose modern life as a crisis of motivation, we should ask a more honest question. Have we given people anything worth being fully present for? Because until effort has a direction, calling people lazy will remain a lie, and one that costs us far more than we realize. This has been Lumen et Ratio, Light and Reason.